Hello, and welcome to this episode of In the Principal's Office. My name is Sarita Nair, and I am the school principal of Chetan Dattaji Gaikwad English Medium School in Pune, India. On behalf of global school leaders, I'm delighted to be your host today. Usually, being called to the principal's office is a scary prospect, but I hope through this series we are able to change that. Today, I'm honored to have a global education policy maker visit me in my office. I'm excited to speak to him about the leadership required for schools today. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Jaime Saavedra, former Minister of Education, Peru, and current Global Director of Education at the World Bank. Mr. Jaime, welcome to the show. We are delighted to have you join us today.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Nair. A pleasure to be here.
Same here. So here's my question for you, Mr. Jaime. What was your relationship with your school principal? Did you ever get called to the principal's office?
I did, but fortunately, for the good reasons. Particularly in secondary, I was called a few times because I was part of the student council of the school. So in that regard, it was not fortunately a scary prospect. My discussions with the principal. I have to confess though that in my specific case, I was a little bit more closer to a few teachers than to the principal himself. And I do recognize the critical role, I mean, of the principal, and that's in terms of the spirit of the school. So that was important then, and it is important here today. But in terms of my own experience, I think there were a few teachers that were really a huge influence over me, and that inspired me in terms of what I was going to do in the future.
Thank you so much. Principals and teachers really can together strengthen the school culture. You've
Correct.
been working on creating policies that impact millions of children worldwide. You also frequently talk about the role school principals play in ensuring those policies are implemented. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yes. So I think the whole issue of management of the school system of the school itself, it's something that we have not paid enough attention when we talk about education policy. From the perspective of the bank, for instance, who works mainly with governments, we talk about what's the overall policy, right, at the national level or at a regional or state level. And now we have recognized explicitly that the management issue, right, is something that is one of the key pillars of any progress that we can make in terms of improving quality of education. Because we always talk about the early childhood education interventions. We talk about what's the structure of the teacher's career, and how teachers should be supported and motivated. What are the interventions that are needed inside the classroom, right, in order to facilitate the work of the teachers. We talk about technology. We're talking now also about the need to have safe and inclusive schools. And many of those things are things that we have been always talking about, uh, key areas of action in order to improve quality of learning. But sometimes we forget that there's an additional element that is how to manage all those all those parts of the education process, and to manage, right, all these issues, is that we need to have very strong management and very strong leadership at the system level when we talk about education systems, and at the school level. And there I always said, look, the job of the principal is absolutely essential, and it's very, very difficult, because the principal has to be a leader from a pedagogical perspective, right? It has to manage and motivate her teachers, which is difficult in terms of a human resource management perspective. but then it has to manage a whole institution and has to manage the relationships with the community and have to manage the relationship with the educational authorities. And at the end of the day, we'll be worried about the lives of the whatever 500 or 1,000 children that are in her school. And to a certain extent, is responsible of what's happening with those kids during those hours that the kid is at school. So if you put all those things together, and please don't be scared about your own role, right? If you put all those elements together, you understand, Jesus, this is a very, very difficult job. This is a very complicated job, right? And at the same time, is a critical role because the principal will define the spirit of the school, right? And that's something that has been very clear to me in visits in schools. You know, the critical role of the principal in order to have a in order to change, right, the collective mood, right, and the mission that the teachers have when working at the in the classroom.
That's amazing. Really good to hear from you. As a school principal myself, these last 2 years have really pushed my understanding of leadership. We had to keep the school community connected together. All my teachers, parents, my family, and our friends rose to the challenge. We moved from Gurukul to Google. Parents became our partners, and we sustained. So, I am really curious to hear from you. Given your work and the context of pandemic, what kind of leadership do you think is needed to get schools back on track?
So, and I would like to learn a little bit more from you about your experience during this last couple of years, right, of pandemic that was different in terms of how were you able to bring in, right, the community, teachers and parents together um, in order to fight a completely strange situation, right, and something completely new that we were not prepared for. But so I would like to hear about that. Going to your question, I think the huge challenge that we have today is that schools, teachers, and principals are receiving children who, first of all, have had many different experiences, right, in during this last 2 years, right? Some were able to stay really connected with the education process because of the characteristics of their homes or their communities, but others were completely disconnected, right? There's a huge variance across the schools, and I'm sure there is a huge variance even within schools and even within a classroom, right? So good teachers know, and you know that, I mean, within a classroom, there's always a huge heterogeneity, right? Different children require different types of support and different type of attention, right? For all of them to get the skills that they need. But that heterogeneity probably now is even larger, right? Because of the very different experiences they have had at home during these last 2 years. So then the key challenge for the leaders of the system and the leaders of the school is how to support that new challenge that teachers will have. Now during these months that we're living now that children have returned to school, right? How to handle, right, that complicated situation in which you have children who have lived many different, very different experiences, and some will have a small will be a little bit behind of what they should be in terms of the competencies that you expect for that grade, but others will be very behind, right? So that is, I think, the huge leadership challenge that we have during these weeks and months.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you, and that is the reality today because children have seen a lot of emotional uh, turmoil in their own houses. They have lost some of them lost their parents, relatives, and neighbors. So they're all overcoming a lot of emotional trauma as well. And of course, the loss of learning that has taken place. it's going to take some time to bring them back to school in, I would say, in a complete way.
Hmm.
Because, as you said rightly, that all the students could not join us. Yes, we did try our level best to bring the children online, but then everybody could not make use of the technology in the way it was supposed to be, because they had to switch over to the technology in a virtual manner.
Correct.
And they were coming from those communities where they had one single phone in their house, and there were two, three children to take the online classes. And their parents had to be taught how to go on a Zoom, how to go on a Google Meet, because there's children of nursery, KG, standard 1 and 2. They know how to play games on the phone, but they do not know how to go on an online class. Not
Yes,
only
and
that,
yeah.
not only,
So,
sorry,
but one question, I mean, what is your sense of the you're absolutely right that the experiences at home have been very, very different. And my sense is that this pandemic has showed us that there's a digital divide, of course, that we need to close, right? Some kids have some access because of technology, because of access to technology and devices and internet connections. Others didn't. We were always saying yes, but in all homes you will have a smartphone. But even if they have a smartphone, they will not have a smartphone that each child would have all the time, right?
yes,
But also the a key lesson from this pandemic is that if even if the technology was there, it is clear that all that can complement, but will never replace uh, the
the
presence
presence
of
of teachers.
the presence of the teacher and the
Yes,
and being in the school and the school as an institution, right? If things would have been perfect, we would be saying, well, we don't need schools, right? I mean, we can just manage virtually. I mean, that's not needed. Now, with the pandemic, I think it's absolutely clear that the school as an institution is absolutely essential.
exactly.
You have to interact with hundreds of parents. What is your experience in terms of the parents understanding and recognizing that there has been a learning loss and that we need to accelerate now, that we need to address the education needs of children in a different way? What is your sense in terms of the view of parents regarding this?
So parents are, they have understood the importance of the school. They understood the importance of education, and our school has just reopened after the vacations. We are in the process of reopening, and we've got like a lot of parents who had gone back to the villages, and they could not study online as fruitfully as we expected them. They want their children to come back for the extra classes
I
before the
see.
actual school begins.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's where we observe that the parents, they give a lot of importance to the education of their children, and they have understood what they have lost, and they want to make up for it.
Okay, now that's great because I mean the sometimes to address a problem, you need to recognize that there's a problem, right?
Yes,
So I think that is absolutely critical.
yes. That was really great to hear your thoughts on that. My next question involves a little game, a quick round of rapid fire. I
Okay.
have a set of sentences that are incomplete, and
Okay.
we would
That's
like for you
dangerous.
to we would like for you to complete them with the first thing that comes to your mind.
Okay.
So, are you ready?
I hope so.
Oh, great. Here it goes. Joy in the classroom looks like.
Um, a great interaction between among peers and with the teacher.
Children today need.
To be safe and happy in school.
So true. Schools in the future need to.
Recognize the critical role that they have in the lives of children and parents.
School leadership is.
Very difficult and very important.
That's true. That's true. That was fantastic. Thank you for playing along. And now for my final question. If you were a principal today, what would you focus on? Any advice for all the school principals out there listening to this?
So I think I would refer to what we were discussing a few minutes ago, that it was understanding and recognizing that we cannot come back to school as business as usual, right? We are in really extraordinary moments, moments that we have never lived, in which fortunately kids are already back to school. But first, the first line of order is to assure that all my kids are back to school, right? And make sure that we look at the community level and we see if there is one student that is not back, what's happening with him or her. So that's the first thing. And then once I have assured that all my children are back to school and they are where they should be, is to recognize the fact that when now that they are back to school, they will need a different engagement than what they would have needed otherwise. That we need to start the learning process where that child is today, and that child might be maybe behind a few months, or he might be or she might be behind 3 years. So actually I cannot use the contents of the curriculum that in principle I would have used in other circumstances. I need to adapt to what each child needs. And if I'm the principal, I need to make sure that then the teacher has the support to teach needed in order for him or her to teach at the right level, to teach at the level that the child is. Something that is very complicated, right? Teachers will have to group students in different ways, to group them according to their level of competency and not to the level of their grade. They will have to give additional tutoring. Maybe I can bring some more volunteers to help teachers, right? I will do a big campaign, right? If I were a principal, and hopefully with support of the authorities, of the education authorities, to bring more volunteers, train them in order to support the remediation process that is needed. And finally, now two more things. One is, as a principal, I think they will have to be very pragmatic, right? You cannot cover the whole curriculum, right? And in many of our countries, the curriculums are very, very big and very dense and very thick, and teachers have sometimes difficulties in terms to cover the whole thing. Well, we need to be pragmatic and cover the basics, cover the most important things. And finally, as all good principals always do, to care about the mental health about our children.
Yes.
So that is always important, but now is even more important, right? Given the complex situations in which our children have been during the last two complex and challenging situations in which our children have been during the last 2 years. So, and then I will recognize, Jesus, this is a very difficult job, right? This is very tough, but that's what we need to do. That's what we need to do.
Yes, definitely differentiated learning and listening to the students is going to be in order, because the children want to tell and speak with their teachers and share their experiences. And that is how the teacher is also going to help them with their social and emotional health as well, by telling, listening to them. So
Exactly.
wonderful that it was really, really great listening to your thoughts, and an absolute pleasure to speak with you today. We are
Thank
lucky
you
to
very much.
have people like you who think so deeply about collective leadership and its importance in building a future for children around the world. We cannot thank you enough for this conversation. To
Thank you
our
very much.
viewers,
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
and my pleasure as well. Thank you so much. To our viewers, thank you for joining us. As you listen to these conversations, do let us know what you think is the kind of leadership needed to build excellent schools. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. See you in our next episode of In the Principal's Office. Thank you and good day.